Welcome back, everyone. Today I started playing the FIDE Candidates tournament here in Madrid, Spain. In the first round, I was playing against Fabiano Caruana, the former World Championship challenger who played Magnus Carlsen for the title in 2018. Alright, so obviously the first round game, starting with the black pieces, has been a long time coming. Many people have been waiting for this event, so without further ado, let's jump right into the game. So the game starts e4, I play e5, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and I play knight f6, showing that I'm intending to play the Berlin defense like I've been playing a lot in the recent past. Fabiano plays d3, bishop c5, he takes on c6, knight bd2 is played, and now I play bishop e6. All pretty standard. Again, with this being a very long tournament, with it being 14 rounds, I don't want to go too into the specifics, so I'll keep the opening comments generally to a minimum. Anyway, I play bishop e6, Fabiano castles here. Knight takes e5 is not a move because after queen d4 here, black is threatening to capture both the knight on e5 as well as capturing the pawn on f2. So say white goes knight f3, queen f2 is checkmate. If white castles, you simply win the knight on e5. So white cannot grab the pawn here, so Fabiano castles, bishop d6, and now I play the move knight b3. Now here I use a lot of time, and again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of what I was thinking about, but at this point, I knew that Fabiano had prepared this line for the game, and I was trying to figure out which line I wanted to play. Now, there are many different approaches here, but after thinking for about 10 minutes, I played queen e7, Fabiano played the move knight a5, and now I took quite a bit of time debating whether to castle here or play rook b8. Now, I know that castles is the main line here. However, with Fabiano having had 9 months to prepare before the Candidates tournament, I decided to play rook b8 because I thought even if rook b8 is a little bit dubious, perhaps, the game is still very unclear. There's a lot of play for both sides, and it's better to play against Fabiano out of preparation than Fabiano in preparation, even if that means you're slightly worse. So I play rook b8, which I knew was a little bit dubious during the game, but I tried to emulate Magnus. So bishop g5 is played by Fabiano. I go h6, bishop h4, and now I play g5, bishop g3, knight d7, and now Fabiano played d4 here. Now, I think this is sort of the start of going the wrong direction, but again, it's a little bit tricky to figure out what exactly white is supposed to play. The white can obviously play c3 to support d4, but again, after h5, h4, it's very hard to judge whether this is good for white or whether it's very bad for white. Again, it looks quite scary to the human eye. So Fabiano plays d4. Now I play f6, consolidating the center here. Fabiano plays queen d3, and now I go h5. He takes, I take, takes, pawn takes. If white were to capture the knight, for example, after pawn takes, h4 is still a very big threat here, and your bishop on g3 could get trapped, so that's why Fabiano takes with the bishop. I take, now he goes knight c4. I played rook d8, takes, takes. If white were to play queen e2 here, for example, after bishop c4, queen c4, I can go g4, knight d2, and now I can play the idea of king d7 to king to c8. Now, it's worth noting during the game, I did think about this idea, and I did consider taking here right away and trying to go g4, knight to king d7, but after queen to b3, I have a problem that if I move the rook away from b8, white wins the pawn, and if I don't move the rook from b8, white's going to go knight c4, and if I put the king on c8, with the rook on b8, this is actually quite bad, as opposed to having this rook on, say, g8, for example. So that's why I chose to play rook d8 here. And Fabiano took, played queen e3, g4, knight d2. I played a6, b3, and this is where I made a critical mistake in the game. Now, the reason I showed you that line before is because I had considered ideas with king d7 there, but in this position, for some reason, whether it was sort of being the first round, being a little bit rusty, I simply was a little bit too carefree or careless, I guess you could say here, and I thought that I could castle, which is a big mistake. What I should have done is I should have played either rook g8 with the idea of playing h4 and queen g5, or I should have played h4 followed by king d7 here. If I had played either of these ideas, I suspect that I would have had good chances, and I don't think I would have lost the game. Unfortunately, I castled here, and I simply underestimated Fabiano's next move and the resulting idea after it. Because after castles, I simply was worried about queen h6 initially, but then I noticed this nice idea with queen f6, and if queen h5, rook h7, the queen is getting trapped here on h5. So once I saw this, I thought, okay, well, if I can castle, I'm going to be able to go like queen g7, stack the rooks, maybe go d5, I should be better, but I simply underestimated this move f3, which Fabiano played here. And the reason that this becomes very tricky to play now is if I take on f3, having castled the king to the king side, after rook takes f3, knight f3, computer says after rook f8, black is still okay, but you have to worry about knight g5, you have to worry about queen h6, and your king feels kind of open here on g8. So for those reasons, I didn't want to take on f3, and I played this move queen g7. Again, I still didn't really understand until he took on g4, and now after taking takes rook a d1, I suddenly realize that there are serious problems here because white is going to be able to put the knight on either g3 or e3 later on. My center is a little bit weak here. I don't really want to push in the center, and so it's very hard to play already. Now, during the game, I thought for quite a while here. I think I used about 10 to 15 minutes, and I ended up playing d5. Now, one thing a lot of people probably have noticed from my streams is there are many times when I've said, this move doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, but I'm going to play it anyway. And this was one of those situations where, after thinking for quite a while, I just decided to play the move, even though I knew that it was not the best move, simply because I did not see a way for my opponent to punish me. So I played d5 here. We got e takes d5, c takes d5, rook d to e1 is played here. And now I play the move e4. The idea behind e4 is simply to consolidate the pawns in the center of the board here. But again, the problem is that they become weak. First of all, white can rotate the knight to e3 or g3. There's also this idea with c4, which Fabiano finds. So he trades, goes c4. And now it's very hard to play because I have a couple of weaknesses. g4 and e4 are very weak here. I can't really do anything on the f file, even though I have the rook here. And so with the two weaknesses, the open king, it's going to be very hard to play. So I go rook e8 here. Fabiano trades. He plays knight f1. Very nice move. Again, the bishop looks really nice on d5, but with these pawns here, there's really no scope. Obviously, the pawns on a2 and b3 aren't weak. I can't really attack on the diagonal towards g2 because the pawn on e4 is in the way, and this knight is jumping, and both of these two pawns are simply too weak. So I play queen e5 here. Queen h6 is played. Queen g7, queen d6 played by Fabiano. Very, very good move. Of course, he does not want to trade the queens because if queens come off the board, I have very good drawing chances due to the fact that my king is not really under attack and material is even. So Fabiano plays queen d6, I go bishop c6, and now he gets the knight to the very nice square on e3. It targets the pawn on g4, and the pawn on e4 here is blockaded. So there are a lot of issues, and at this point already, I think for a human, this should be technically winning for white, even though a computer could still probably put up quite a bit of resistance. So now I play this move g3, and Fabiano plays hg3, which is a very interesting move. Computer actually thinks that after rook f1, just ignoring everything here on the king side, there's knight f5, maybe rook f4, rook g4. There's simply too many threats here, and computer thinks that white is winning. So rook f1 would have won on the spot, but pawn takes, of course, is a very human, very logical move. So now I go queen e5, again trying to exchange the queens here. Fabiano checks. We have a little bit of a repetition because we're both very low on time. And now he goes queen to h6, and now I take on g3, which is a fatal blunder. What I should have probably played here was rook f8, but even after rook f8, queen h4, it's very, very miserable. White is protecting the pawn on g3. White can go knight g4. Again, my king is very, very weak, and e4 is still potentially a weakness in the long term. So this should be winning for white. Instead, I take the pawn trying to even material. We get rook f1, queen g7. Fabiano plays queen h4 here, which is actually a mistake in time pressure. We're both very low on time. And one of my probably my only major complaint is that for this event, unlike every other event, there is no increment. So because there's no increment for this event, if you get very low on time, you have to be very, very careful about how you budget and how you use it, because without those 30 seconds, it's simply very, very difficult. So after rook f1, queen g7 being played here, Fabiano plays queen h4, queen h7, queen g3, I block. Queen f4 would have been winning here on the spot because now I can't stop knight g4, knight d5, and knight f5. Simply too many threats here, and white should be winning. So after queen g3, I play queen to g7 here. Fabiano plays the move queen to h4. Now I go bishop d7, correctly realizing that since we've reached move 41, we've reached a time control, I do not want to repeat, because here I did notice that after queen f4, the knight jumps are simply fatal for me, and there's no defense. So here I played bishop d7, which is the best move. Fabiano plays rook d1. Thought for a long time to find this move. Objectively not the best move, but a move that I think makes a lot of sense, because the computer defense after rook d1 I think is simply unrealistic for a human to find. The reason I did not play this initially was, besides not seeing the idea with queen f4, I thought knight d5 was winning, but then I realized after time control that I can check. King h2, queen d5, queen g3 check, king to h7, and initially I thought that rook f4 is simply threatening rook h4 and a ladder checkmate here, and there's no way to stop it, but I do have the very nice move rook to e5, and now after rook h4, rook h5, black is simply winning. So Fabiano plays rook d1, and here I kind of, again, I let my guard down, and I didn't use my time. We just reached time control, and here I probably should have used 10 to 15 minutes looking for the solution. Instead, I blitzed out my next couple of moves. So I played bishop e6, which is actually one of the best moves here. Knight d5 is played, and now now I play this move, rook to f8 here. Again, what I should have done probably in this situation right here, as I alluded to, is I should have used my time and probably tried to find this move, rook e7. Again, very, very tough move to find, but the reason that it's okay is after knight d5, rook f7, I actually thought during the game somehow there's some trick, like I don't know, there's queen e4 here, or there's something like knight f4, knight h5, or queen d8, but I assumed that this was losing instead of using my time. So I should have used that time, because instead I played bishop e6, and now after knight d5 it becomes very hard to play. I can't take the knight because after rook d5 there's this idea of rook g5, which is just winning for white, and after rook f8 queen takes e4 here, it's simply lost. Now the computer shows that I can play this move queen g4, and after and Fabiano still would have had to find queen e1, maintaining the clear advantage. But the reason I did not play this is that when I calculated rook f8, I thought that after queen e4 I could simply go queen f7 with the idea of queen f2. Much to my horror, as soon as Fabiano took on e4, I realized that after this queen f7 move, white can go rook d3 followed by rook g3, and there's simply nothing I can do. It's completely lost. One very nice line here would be bishop takes d5, rook to g3, king h8, queen to h4 check. And now the only move is queen h7, but after queen d4, I simply cannot stop the checkmate. After rook f6, queen g7, queen g7, this would have been game over. So at this point, I was very upset at myself, and I simply couldn't regroup and find this queen g4 move. So instead, I just blitzed out queen h6, and after rook e1, the game is effectively over. I can maybe try to trade on d5 here and go king h8, but after queen takes b7, white is up 2 pawns here, and for someone of Fabiano's caliber, this should be quite simple to win. So I played rook d8, knight e7, king f7, knight f5, and I actually blundered that I couldn't take the knight here, because then white has a nice move, queen to e7, winning the rook on d8. Nonetheless, even if I had spotted that at this point, it's already pretty close to resignable. Anyway, I go rook d8, knight e7, king f7, knight to f5, queen f6, and now Fabiano plays rook f1, and my king is simply too open. I played bishop d5, knight h6 is played. One move that I initially wanted to play, which doesn't quite work, is king g8, because there is actually no effective discovered attack right away. But after king g8, white wins with queen g4 check. If I go to the h file, for example, there's queen h5 check, king g8, knight h6, queen guards the knight, rook captures the queen, next move, game over. And if I go king f8, which is the other move, white can go queen to b4 check, and again, geometry here. If I go to f7, there's knight h6 check, winning the game. If I go to e8, there's knight d6 check, winning the game. If I go to g8, there are a couple ways, but actually there aren't a couple. Knight e7 is the only one, but again, another discover attack, and I would lose the queen. So I didn't do that. Instead, I played bishop d5, but knight h6, king g7, queen g4, and now unfortunately I had to resign the game, because if I play, let's just say I move the king, white wins the queen, and if I block after knight f5, it's again going to be more forks. If I go to f7, many ways for white to win, but probably simplest is knight h4 check, and actually after queen f6, there's queen g6, very nice move to win the queen. And if I go to h7, white goes queen h4 check, king g8, knight e7, again a fork, collecting the queen on g6. So unfortunately, I lose my first round game here in the FIDE candidates in Madrid. Very disappointing for me, certainly, because most of the games I've lost to Fabiano traditionally, I've gotten into trouble in the opening, because he's one of the players with some of the best preparation out there. In this game, I avoided his preparation. I was up on the clock, and I maybe was slightly better if I had played h4 or rook g8, one of those ideas without castling. But alas, I did castle, and unfortunately, one wrong king move cost me the game today. And even though I can be annoyed about the mistake, Fabiano obviously played very well after that blunder. So credit goes to him for converting it very nicely. Nonetheless, it's a disappointing start, but we do have 13 more rounds. So we'll see what happens tomorrow as I play with the white pieces against Timur Rajabov. Once again, thank you so much to all you guys who have been watching on Twitch and on YouTube for that matter. Thank you so much for all the subs, all the support, and all the positivity. So I'll see you guys soon with another recap.